Hey, everybody. We're here with John Burrows. John is running to unseat the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, in California's 20th Congressional District, which makes up the southern and southeastern part of the state's Central Valley, if I'm correct. Also, before we get started, remember that if you want to get access to an extended version of this interview with some additional questions, mostly just some funny questions that we just want to talk to Jonathan about, head to krasenstein.substack.com. But yeah, let's get started. It's great to have you here, John. I know
Great
that
to be
you
here.
have a lot planned for the next year and a half.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you so much, Brian and Ed, for having me on.
Yeah, so you are running against Kevin McCarthy in 2024. Can you just tell us a little bit about your campaign and why you are choosing to run in 2024?
Yeah, absolutely. So Brian, I was born and raised here in the Central Valley. I've spent my entire life here. I went away for a little bit for 2 years at University of California, Santa Cruz. So I had a little 2 year escape, but for my entire life, I've been here in the Central Valley. I was born and raised here. I know folks here. All my friends are here. My family's here. And I love the Central Valley. The reason why I'm running against Kevin McCarthy and the reason why I decided to step up is because what I saw in Congress in January was a so-called representative who went through 15 votes to consolidate his own power. Meanwhile, here in the Central Valley, for decades, while we've been represented by Kevin McCarthy, hasn't done much. Hasn't done much for everyday working folks. It breaks my heart to see folks who work every single day, sometimes 2, 3 jobs just to make ends meet. Meanwhile, somebody's playing, political games in Washington, trying to help themselves out and then help their friends out in Washington. Meanwhile, we're left with no representation. Kevin McCarthy, I don't believe has had a true challenger, and I'm stepping up to make sure that he does have a true challenger.
So you say he hasn't had a true challenger. Are there any other Democrats who have already decided to challenge McCarthy as well, or are you the only one so far?
Yeah, so in the past, Kevin McCarthy has had, folks who ran against him. But we're starting 13 months early, right? We're jumping in the gate, first ones, and we're running a grassroots powered campaign. We're talking to voters every single home. We're talking to folks, on community colleges, on universities. We're talking to folks at their businesses. We're talking to folks, at their homes. We're running a grassroots campaign. We're talking to folks why I'm running and why I want to represent them and why I believe that I have their best interests in mind as opposed to Kevin McCarthy. Um, you know, we're starting 13 months a month early before the primary ballot so that we can talk to as many folks as possible. And it's people powered. We launched 3 weeks ago, and we have had an incredible amount of support. Locally here folks who every single day want to jump in and want to help out because they want to see Kevin McCarthy gone because they know that he's done nothing for us.
Yeah, and I've actually seen you on Twitter, and you're really building a following on Twitter. I think you had over 35,000 followers or something like that. How can people find you on Twitter, by the way? What's your username?
Yeah, so they can find us on Twitter on John Burrows CA. So that's JohnBurrows CA.
Definitely
But
give him a
yeah,
follow.
yeah, we've had an amazing outpouring of folks who want to join this campaign. Twitter is just one of the many examples, and it's really showing that folks are tired. They saw the 15 rounds of voting for Kevin McCarthy to become Speaker. Meanwhile, what has he done in 20 plus years that he's been in Congress for our district?
Do you think that McCarthy is a hostage to the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, the George Santoses, and the Matt Gaetz of the party?
And I think that's the $1 million question. What happened behind closed doors? We saw Matt Gaetz kind of dangle the speakership in front of Kevin McCarthy, as if it was his to give out, right? So what was the deal that he made? Yeah, it really does bring the question: who's controlling Congress right now? Is it Kevin McCarthy? Is it Marjorie Taylor Greene? Is it Matt Gaetz? We haven't seen much out of Kevin McCarthy here in the district. What he's doing in Washington is, whatever he's doing in Washington. But I think there could be definitely some hostage playing.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely interesting because McCarthy, as Speaker of the House, it's likely that he's way more concentrated on his national profile than that of actually the district that he's representing. So I think that if there's ever a good reason to replace McCarthy, it's just that we want somebody that would represent the district that you're in rather than somebody that's concentrating more nationally. But I think one question that a lot of people have, especially Democrats, is that is it possible? Is it possible for a Democrat to win California's 20th district? I think McCarthy won with like 67% of the vote in 2022. And obviously that's 2/3. So like, what can you do to appeal to those in the middle or even those on the center right that could possibly sway some of those people over?
Yeah, great question. So the reason why we're starting 13 months early is because our main goal is going to be one, talking to as many people as possible, and also registering as many people as possible. There's so many people who live in the Central Valley who I have spoken with who are not registered to vote because they don't believe that their vote matters. There's so many people out there who are not voting because they don't believe in the process, because they think that the likes of Kevin McCarthy and Devin Nunes, they go over there to Washington and they play their own political games over there, right? And they don't actually care about the valley. So I think the thing is communicating to folks that, hey, there are folks who care and there are people who want to represent them. And that's exactly who I am. I was born and raised here, and I want to represent the folks of the Central Valley. And I want to serve their best interests, even though Kevin McCarthy isn't.
So if I'm not mistaken, California's 23rd district redistricted into California's 20th district. How do you think this is going to affect I know there was an election and McCarthy won that election after the redistricting, but how has that affected the people there? What are their thoughts on the redistricting? And do you think that's going to be of your benefit or of Kevin McCarthy's benefit?
Yeah, so it's, I think that with redistricting, we did see a huge shift in the district itself. Before it was primarily based in the South Central Valley. Now it comes all the way up to Central Valley. So that's going to be that's a huge shift. And it comes all the way up to Fresno, where I was born and raised my entire life. And while I think in the past election, it may seem that Kevin McCarthy is in a position of power, but at the end of the day, we have dilapidated roads, right? Our infrastructure is just not there. So what has Kevin McCarthy done in the past 20 years to make sure that we have drivable roads? Also, we have the nation's highest in the nation homicide rate here in the Central Valley, down in Bakersfield. What has Kevin McCarthy done in 2 decades in Congress to address this? We see an exodus of small farmers who cannot compete with large corporate farmers. And on top of that, we have Kevin McCarthy who's taking money from the oil industry and allowing the oil industry to continue here in the Central Valley. Meanwhile, there's no looking towards the future in what we can do and what progress we can make for future Americans. That's setting up a solar farm. That's setting up a solar manufacturing company here in the Central Valley, right? Windmill, chip production, lithium ion battery factories. There's so much that can be done. Meanwhile, we have a representative who's backwards thinking and is focusing on the past and profits of corporations and his own best interests.
I think it's funny how McCarthy oftentimes talks about, Democratic cities have this high crime rate. It's Democratic cities that have these huge murder rates. But in reality, Bakersfield, which he represents, like you said, is one of the highest crime rates in the nation. And you don't hear about him talking about the homicide rate there. I think that's also one of the highest, if not the highest. So what would you do? Like, what would your strategy be in order to try and get that crime rate down? I know you're not going to be the mayor, but you're going to be in Congress, and there are things you can do. What would you do in order to help that out?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. One of the biggest things I think a Congress member can do is help bring money and work with folks down here locally, right? Because like you said, I'm not running for mayor, so I don't directly deal with the police department. But what you can do is you can make sure that the mayor, or you can work with the mayor and also local representatives to ensure that local municipal governments and the state government has a multi-pronged approach to dealing with crime, right? It's not all reliance on the police department. The police department cannot solve all of our problems. It's about having a community that is brought together through, whether it be neighborhood watch programs, or whether it's through other programs of providing opportunities to those who once were, victims of a life of crime, to helping them find other opportunities, and helping those who are currently engaged in criminal activity to find a way out, right? Because I think with crime, it's not just they, like, people don't want to be criminals, but a lot of the times people who are engaging in criminal activity are doing it because of the situations and the environment that they're surrounded by. And when you have high poverty levels, that leads to more crime, which, in the Central Valley, we're still today recovering from the '08 recession. We've had high unemployment rates, some of the highest unemployment rates in the nation since the '08 recession. It's what is Kevin McCarthy doing about that? So going back to your original question of addressing crime, Kevin McCarthy refuses to even speak to the governor of California, Gavin Newsom. We have Democrats who are elected up and down the Central Valley that Kevin McCarthy refuses to speak with. Day one, if I'm elected to Congress, if I have the pleasure of representing the folks of the California's Congressional 20th District, what I'm doing is I'm talking to everybody, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, no matter what side of the aisle that you are on. I want to engage in conversation with you, because it's all about uplifting our community and helping folks out who don't see, other paths out other than, criminal activity.
Yeah, I think that a lot of politicians, I would say more so on the right, they seem to oversimplify crime and look at the crime statistics,
Yeah.
and blame it on certain things to make it more of a political push. But the same can be said for the economy. I mean, there's so many different variables that kind of drive an economy. And like you said, there are struggling farmers in California Central Valley. Most people think of California, they think of Silicon Valley or LA,
Yeah.
But the farming industry in California is huge, and they are struggling. And I don't think McCarthy has lived up to his promises in the Central Valley when it comes to those farmers who are having their livelihoods at stake. So
Yeah.
I guess my question to you is, what would you do differently? How can you help boost the economy in the Central Valley of California? How can you help these farmers?
Yeah, I think helping farmers has a lot to deal with policy, right? I think Kevin McCarthy, he would rather start trade wars with China because it's a good political talking point for him, right? It helps him fundraise, it helps him stay in Congress. But it's not everything, right? California, here in the Central Valley, we produce more food than any other portion of the country. So our economy is heavily reliant on agriculture, but because of the policies that have been set in place, small farming, which is a pride, right? You have generations of families who have grown up living on the farm, working on the farm, and then taking over the farm and then passing that down onto their children. You don't see that anymore. You don't see that as much anymore because you have large corporations, large agriculture corporations, companies who are coming in and they're squeezing out the small farmers, making it infeasible to do small farming, and making it infeasible to make money, owning a couple of acres of farmland. And instead, we have, these large corporations that are coming in, and they are buying up these small farms, or they're underpricing their product so that these small farmers can't make it. And they're getting away with it because they have people like Kevin McCarthy in Washington, who don't care about the everyday small farmer, don't care about the everyday working person. But Kevin McCarthy, he cares about his bottom line, and that's about being reelected. Just like corporations care about their bottom line, which is their bottom dollar. Whereas owning a small farm is a lot more than just your bottom dollar, and if you're making it's about your family, it's about your livelihood, it's about how you're taking care of the land, it's about what you're doing for your community and what you're producing food for your community. That's no small thing. But you have these corporations and Kevin McCarthy who are in bed with them, and all they care about is their own success.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, in that these big corporations are using their economies of scale to squeeze out these small farmers, underpricing them, and then forcing them to sell. Hey, you can't make a profit against us anyway, so why don't you sell at a cheaper price so that we can take control and control more of the Central Valley? So that's a good point. And I think another good point you brought up is McCarthy could be putting tariffs on China or doing whatever he's doing, and that might be in what he thinks would be his political national interest, but it's not in the interest of the district that he's serving. So I think there's kind of a problem there, and that's something I'm sure a lot of people feel whenever any politician is kind of putting their national interests over their local interest.
Yeah, and every day Kevin McCarthy does that, right? Because it helps him and it helps his base, and it helps get him on Fox News, helps keeps Fox News going, right? If they can all keep everybody distracted, and they can keep the conversation on what they want to talk about, then they win, right? I think that Fox News, they put out a lot of disinformation. I think that you see what happened with leaking or giving the tapes from the January 6th committee over to Tucker Carlson. We know who Kevin McCarthy's allegiance is to. It's to large corporations like Fox News, large ag companies, big oil. That's Kevin McCarthy, and that's who he's in bed with. And that's the picture that we're going to draw down here in California's 20th.
I think a lot of the country's kind of detached from the whole farming thing. Like like you said, your area has a large amount of farming, but where we are, it's not really that big. And there's a lot of people in cities who just aren't familiar with how farming, how the corporations are coming in. But I think that you could compare it to, let's say, a Lowe's or a Home Depot coming in and pushing the mom and pop hardware store out of business. Mm-hmm. And then they're forced to shut down because the prices that Lowe's can afford to sell merchandise at, or even an Amazon that can force some of these stores out of business. And we're seeing it on a huge scale, but farming is definitely something that's being affected greatly by it. And a lot of people, and I think a lot of Republicans, don't realize that people they're voting for are supporting these corporations over the smaller farmer in a lot of cases, not in all cases. I know there's a lot of Republicans who do try and support the smaller farmers, but in McCarthy's case, that doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah, no, you see large corporations, coming in and squeezing small farmers out all the time. And it's a problem because it's not a route that's sustainable, right? You don't want your food to travel 1,500 miles to get to you before it gets on your plate, before it shows up at the grocery store. You want local, fresh produced food. And right now in the Central Valley, and a large part of our water wars that we're having right now is that, we're producing, the world's supply of almonds, or I believe a quarter of the world's supply of almonds. So it's which is a very water intensive crop, and they're large corporations, right? Almond has a very high price to it. So when these corporations come in, they bring with them lots of money, and they price out the small farms, right? They play a lot of tricks without getting into too many of the details. They play a lot of tricks on our local economy that push small farmers out who are producing local crops for our community, whether that be something like spinach or berries. or everyday sustenance food, they're pushing them out, and it's a huge problem. And Kevin McCarthy's at the helm of it.
So I know you said that if you were elected to Congress and you took McCarthy's seat, the first thing you would do is contact everybody, whether it be Democrat or Republican, you'll talk to all of them. If you commit to one thing other than that, if you were to win the seat, what would it be?
It would be to push the Central Valley forward. Like in Kern County, what we have is we have a huge dependence on oil. So here in the Central Valley, the central part of the Central Valley, it's kind of weird to say, but we're heavily reliant on ag. But in the South Central Valley, the southern portion of it, there's a heavy reliance on oil. Joe Biden said, in his speech, we're going to have oil for the next decade, maybe a few years after that. So yes, while we may need oil now, we will phase it out eventually in the future, because that's what's best for the environment. So what I would do if I was elected to Congress is phase out oil, right? And how we do that is we produce solar panels here in the United States. We produce, we're having a chip shortage still, around the world. Let's produce chips here in the United States. Let's bring jobs back to the United States, and I want to bring jobs to the Central Valley. Because we're going to phase green jobs, environmental jobs that help push us forward and lessen our dependence on oil. So that is one of the things that I would be focusing on if I was elected to Congress.
Yeah, like I don't think people understand how rapidly these green technologies are gonna increase their usage and how efficient these things are going to be. Like solar panels are getting more efficient every year. Batteries that can store this energy are getting more efficient every year. Mm-hmm. And of course you have EVs. And I think there's this misconception, particularly among Republicans, that Democrats want to just destroy the oil industry because they hate oil, and because even though it's bad for the country, that's what they're going to do. But what I think most Democrats I've spoken to, they want to continue drilling for oil as we need it. But look ahead 5, 10, 15, 20 years and say, do you want the United States, or in this case, California, to be one of the leaders in clean, green energy technology? Or do you want other countries like China to do that? And I think ultimately, I think there's room for oil, there's room for green energy, but eventually that green energy, the prices and the efficiencies are going to push oil out of the way. And that's a good thing, because it's going to save us money. It's going to improve the environment. It's going to make things cleaner and greener. So I totally agree with that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's a huge opportunity, right? The thousands of folks, the tens of thousands of folks who currently work in the oil industry, when we phase it out, what jobs are they going to have? And if all of our batteries are coming from other countries, if all of our solar panels are coming from other countries, what jobs are we going to have in the United States in 20, 30 years when we're phased out of oil? Here in California in 2035, you can't sell a gas powered vehicle, in the state of California after 2035. So where are all those vehicles going to be coming from? Hopefully all made in America. But at the end of the day, that just shows that, where the economy is going, and it's going to solar power. It's going to, sustainable technologies. I think that the other things that we need to do is think about, which Kevin McCarthy isn't doing, is what is going to be coming in 20, 30 years. What are we going to be dependent on? And rather than focusing on how we can put Americans in the best possible position to succeed, Kevin McCarthy would rather focus on who are my immediate donors, and that is the oil industry.
Yeah, and speaking of donors and how you're going for the grassroots approach, obviously McCarthy, who is the Speaker of the House, he has a huge pool of donors that he can tap into for re-election in 2024. You're you're relying on grassroots, and I think you're getting off to an early start. You're building a following on social media. You're bringing donations in, but tell us how those grassroots individuals can help you. How can they donate to your campaign? How can they help you on social media? What can they do?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that they can do is to help is to donate to our campaign. You know, and no donation is too small. Whether that's a dollar, two, three, five, 10, 20, it all adds up, right? And I think like you said, you know, we've had, you know, thousands of people, tens of thousands of people who have already caught wind of our campaign, who have joined in on our campaign. So when we have a huge, massive amount of folks who are buying into the success of this campaign, that's how we move forward. That's how we talk to individual voters. That's how we register young people to vote who are on the college campuses, right? The 18, 19, 20-year-olds who are not registered to vote, nobody's spoken with them before. They're just on the college campuses, you know, thinking that the Kevin McCarthy's of the world don't even care about them. That's what we're doing, and every single dollar that's donated to this campaign is going to be reinvested into talking to the voters and talking to them about the issues and the solutions, you know, that this campaign has. So that's one way that they can do that. And especially if it you know, $5 reoccurring every month, it may not seem like a lot, but it really is at the end of the day. When we get to the very end of the campaign, you know, every single time we talk to a voter, that increases the likelihood of this campaign being successful. So whether they make a donation, or whether they call voters in our district, or whether they come down to this district to talk to the voters and folks themselves, those are all ways that they can help this campaign. It's a people-powered campaign. It's a grassroots-powered campaign, and I'm proud of it, because I know Kevin McCarthy doesn't have that.
Yeah. Thanks again, John. And what we're going to do here is we're closing out this portion of the interview, but we want to do a quick 5 minutes of some more lighthearted questions, which will be showing up on our Substack for subscribers. So we're just going to start that here. Ask you a few questions if you don't mind, and just answer them as quickly as you possibly can, I guess. Is that okay?
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'll do my absolute best. Thank you.
Okay, so the first question, who